In their heyday, streetcars enabled people to cross cities with ease and helped give birth to the suburbs. For Ottawa residents, they provided an affordable way to commute to work, enjoy the tall forests in Rockcliffe Park, or relax at the beach on a summer's day. Ottawa's transit began on August 15, 1866, when the Legislative Council and Assembly of Canada granted a perpetual charter to the Ottawa City Passenger Railway Company, or OCPR. By 1870, the first street railway opened from Sussex Street in New Edinburgh to the Chartier Falls. The cars ran on rail and were pulled by horses. This new technology to the city was not without opposition from the public. Iron rails were seen as dangerous for traffic and pedestrians. Property owners were worried about dropping values where cars operated, and people feared there would be no parking along the double-tracked lines. Using horses was also sometimes problematic. An equine influenza in 1872, known as the Great Epizootic, swept across the world, and all but 6 of OCPR's horses were affected by the disease. Due to the influenza, trips were drastically reduced during that year. The OCPR also had a contentious relationship with the city. On August 29, 1889, a new line of track was laid in Rockcliffe on land owned by Thomas Kiefer, president of the Street Railway. In order to connect this new line to their existing network, the company had to construct a track on roadway the city owned. When Kiefer refused to pay the excessive fees proposed by the city, a gap was left in the network. So customers had to get off one of the streetcars, walk almost 400 feet or 140 meters, or take a wheeled carriage provided by Kiefer, and then get on another streetcar to continue their journey to Rockcliffe. On February 26, 1891, the Ottawa Electric Street Railway was incorporated by Thomas Ahern and Warren Soper. Construction began on a new electric street railway on April 9, 1891, and the new network opened on June 29th of that year. By the end of the summer of 1893, the horse-powered lines of the OCPR were converted to electric. The two companies eventually merged in 1894 to become the Ottawa Electric Railway Company, or OER. By 1896, the Electric Railway's network vision was complete, with lines to the Experimental Farm, Lansdowne Park, Rockcliffe Park, and a connection to Hull. No tracks were allowed on Wellington Street in front of the Parliament buildings due to the federal government's refusal to allow it. Several parks opened at the end of streetcar lines. The Ottawa Electric Park, not owned by the OER, opened in 1892, and another opened in Rockcliffe in 1893. On Holland Avenue, the OER opened the West End Park on May 1, 1896, with the first public showing of a film in Ottawa using Edison's Vitascope. However, the OER's biggest amusement park was Britannia on the Bay. Britannia offered beautiful sandy beaches and would become a popular summer getaway location. The Britannia line opened on May 21, 1900, the longest in the network, and the park opened on May 24th. OER's ideas for the project were much more ambitious. They initially planned for the line to extend into Elmer with a bridge at the Deschênes Rapids to take advantage of ridership on the Quebec side. However, the Hull Electric Railway had built to Elmer across the Ottawa River in 1896 and opened an amusement park there called Queen's Park, so OER decided to drop the plan. Another popular pastime at the turn of the century was rifle shooting. With the relocation of the Dominion Rifle Association's range from Sandy Hill to just east of Rockcliffe Park, the OER cooperated with the federal government's militia department to build a line to service the range. This line opened on August 29, 1900. Other extensions were both in 1913, with the Bank Street line extended to Ottawa South and the Preston line to Carling Avenue. At the end of the decade, OER workers went on strike on July 2, 1919. During the strike, 300 jitneys, which are illegal busing services, ran on Ottawa streets. The large number of the jitneys caused a gasoline shortage. The strike lasted until July 26th, and all jitneys were shut down when streetcar service resumed. As 1923 approached, the year when OER's franchise agreement was set to expire, the city was interested in taking over the service. However, both parties couldn't come to an agreement on the value of the system. The city asked the ratepayers in 3 referendums about ownership. The first in 1919 resulted in a vote in favor of purchase, while 2 others in 1921 and 1922 were against it. On July 22, 1922, the city commissioned a transit consultant, Robert Feustel, to do an extensive survey of the system. His report recommended a fixed 5-cent fare and valued the company's property at around $3.8 million. He also recommended the following extensions to the system over 5 years. In the first year, a new line to Ottawa East, a new line across Laurier Avenue Bridge, and one down Bronson Avenue. In the second year, a new line along Queen and Lion Streets to Gladstone Avenue, a line to Eastview's Main Street, and a line through Beechwood. In the third year, a line over the Wellington Street Viaduct and down Fairmount Avenue to Experimental Farm, replacing part of the existing Holland Avenue line. In the fourth year, a new line down Nicholas and Templeton Streets to Marlborough Avenue. In the fifth year, a new line across Billings Bridge to connect to a planned railway station in the South End. After ratepayers voted in favor of OER's continual ownership of the network, the city signed a new 30-year franchise agreement with the company on January 25, 1924, with the fixed fare and extensions recommended in the Feustel report. With the help of the existing streetcar lines, Ottawa suburbs continued to grow, especially along the Holland Avenue and Britannia lines. The streetcars made it easy for people to commute further to and from the downtown core. Although expansion of the network continued throughout the 1920s, not all the extensions in the Feustel report came to fruition. The recommended lines that saw completion were the Bronson line to the canal in 1922, the Laurier Avenue Bridge in 1924, the line to Ottawa East on July 29, 1925, and the Linden Lee line in 1925, which saw the network reach its zenith. The new line to Eastview was never constructed, as Eastview instead chose to establish its own bus service. Between 1923 and 1928, the OER had lost about $1 million. Ridership had dropped more than 10 million passengers between 1921 and 1931 as automobiles became more popular. On July 3, 1932, the OER abandoned its route across the Laurier Avenue Bridge and removed the track after finding out that Canadian National Railway wanted to replace the bridge and have the OER pay for part of it. The city demanded the track be replaced and service restored. However, the OER never complied as businesses on Rideau Street came to their defense. The reduction of streetcar lines began in the mid-20s with the removal of the Rockcliffe line from the Rifle Range to Cloverdale Road. The Rifle Range had moved to Shirley's Bay in 1921, and no cars had operated to the existing terminus since August 20, 1924. The Rockcliffe line was reduced further in 1932 to Buena Vista Road. Service from the Civic Hospital to the Experimental Farm was removed in 1929 when ridership was only 24 people a day. On December 10th of that year, farm employees were told to get off at the Civic Hospital and walk the rest of the way. In response, the federal government ordered the OER off farm property. This would have removed the Civic Hospital link, but an agreement was eventually reached between the two parties, and the hospital loop remained. The first major line to be abandoned was down Elgin Street and into Ottawa East in 1939. The federal government, in response to Jack Graper's plan, wanted the tracks on Elgin removed so they could build a huge boulevard. However, the boulevard only went as far south as Lisgar Street. Over the years, the OER built several barns in the city to store equipment and cars. One of them, the Rockcliffe Barn, suffered severe damage in 3 separate fires between 1927 and 1937. The barn was isolated in Rockcliffe Park, so was far from any available fire protection. During the Second World War, the population of Ottawa exploded, and so did ridership. In fact, in 1942, it exceeded the numbers in 1921. At the end of the war, the OER began a rehabilitation program with the promise of 20 new cars in 1947. However, only 4 were bought as the city had begun negotiations to purchase the system. On October 24, 1947, City Council voted unanimously to take over the OER. On February 16, 1948, ratepayers voted in favor of purchasing the system as well. After the city acquired the network for $6.3 million, the system was transferred to the newly created Ottawa Transportation Commission, or OTC, at midnight on August 12, 1948. From the very beginning of the OTC, there were calls to replace the streetcars with buses. The federal government's Graber plan recommended the city remove them. Norman Wilson, a traffic expert hired by the city to do a survey of the system, recommended no new expansion of streetcars and to keep the existing network for 15 more years. The city was also considering replacing the system with trolley buses, as they cost about a third of streetcars. The Bronson Avenue line was converted to trolley bus in 1951 and opened on December 24th of that year. The trolley buses were quite popular with the public, and the pilot project was considered a success. However, in 1954, Mayor Charlotte Whitten brought up a point which had never been raised before, according to the Ottawa Journal. She claimed the federal government felt the streetcar or trolley bus system would be vulnerable, since the enemy attacking Ottawa could knock out the system at one blow by cutting off the electricity supply. So the only trolley bus line in Ottawa was removed along with streetcars at the end of the decade. The OTC was plagued with debt and dwindling revenues from its inception. They also had to contend with traffic complaints. In response to these complaints, the Deputy Minister of Public Works in 1954 refused parking permits to civil servants living within 2 miles of downtown. The OTC saw a dramatic dip in ridership in 1953 as the federal government reduced the work week to 5 days, which removed a great deal of business on Saturdays. However, the OTC chairman at the time also blamed the drop on more automobiles and more women drivers. By 1957, all Saturday and Sunday streetcar service was replaced by buses, except during winter. The final nail in the coffin for streetcars was the release of the Urich-Curry Report in 1958. It recommended the OTC meet estimated 1957-1959 deficits of $2.6 million and to convert the deteriorating streetcar service to an all-motor bus system. City Council voted to ratify the report on August 5, 1958. Throughout the 1950s, lines dropped like dominoes. By 1953, ridership was low on the Rockcliffe line, so the streetcars were replaced by buses on October 19th. Ridership did not improve, so all service to Rockcliffe was removed a year later. The line on Sussex Drive was removed on January 18, 1954, as the Federal District Commission, forerunner of the National Capital Commission, had plans to replace the bridge over the Rideau River without any tracks. The streetcar line down Creighton Street was removed on July 14, 1954. The Hall-Linden Lee line was removed on November 27, 1954. On April 21, 1956, a section between Holland Avenue and the Civic Hospital was removed for the expansion of Carling Avenue to 6 lanes. 1959, the final year of streetcar service, saw the removal of the following lines: Bank St. Patrick line on January 12th, Holland Laurier line on February 16th, Preston Rideau on April 6th, and finally the Britannia line on Friday, May 1st. From ratification of the Urich-Curry Report to implementation of abandonment, it took 9 months. The last scheduled streetcar, car number 831, ended its Thursday run at 3:25 that Friday morning at the Coburg Barn. On Saturday, May 2nd, the OTC held a parade with thousands in attendance to bid farewell to the era of Ottawa streetcars. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this moment in Ottawa history and would like to learn more, there are links in the description below. Also, if you'd like to see more videos on Ottawa's history, please hit the subscribe button.